Welcome to our next lesson. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about the 5 dysfunctions of teams. What's interesting about this video is the 5 dysfunctions of teams are found around the world, different countries, different cultures, and as well as different performance types of teams. So low performing teams, high performance teams, elite teams, virtuoso teams, same things happen. So let's take a look at what those 5 dysfunctions are and how we can prevent those or diagnose those from happening in the future. We're going to be looking at a lot of research and data that's coming from Patrick Lencioni's book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And in brief, the book is using a fable format or a fairy tale story to explain why even the best teams will struggle to work together. And he offers some actionable strategies for those teams to overcome distrust, which is one of the problems, as well as the office politics. And office politics are everywhere. And he's hoping that by overcoming these, you can achieve the important goals like a cohesive, effective unit. Now, one of Patrick Lencioni's favorite quotes is, "It's as simple as this. When people do not unload their opinions and feel like they've been listened to, they won't really get on board." So what this basically is saying is punishment management, being dictatorial and dogmatic. If people don't feel like they've been heard, they won't really engage with you and give them all their effort. So it's really important that people are heard and understood if you really want that full engagement. So we're going to be showing you how you can do that. So the 5-step model is basically a pyramid, and here's what happens. At the bottom of the pyramid, there is an absence of trust. So this is one of the typical things that you see in teams. They don't trust each other. Then there's a fear of conflict. So the teams may disagree, but they don't want to start a fight or say, "Oh, I don't really like it." And people just kind of are quiet, but then they don't solve the problems. Then there's a lack of commitment. Some people say, someone else is talking all the time. No one will listen to me. I'm being interrupted. And so they don't want to really commit to the team. Then there's an avoidance of accountability where people aren't really buying into what the team is designed to do, and they don't want to be held accountable for it, and they're just kind of sitting around waiting for the meeting to end. And the last one is inattention to results, where, yeah, they're on the team and trying to do a good job, but they're not really looking at the results that they've made at the end of the day. So let's unpack all of these one by one. So number one is the absence of trust. The bottom of the pyramid is the absence of trust part, and it's when team members are unable to show their weaknesses. They want to look good. They don't want to show that they have weaknesses or have made mistakes. Now, this results in them being reluctant to be vulnerable and being open to one another. And the team members are afraid of admitting their mistakes, and they're also unwilling to ask for help. So this is just a lot of people trying to look good, but they're not. They're hiding their mistakes, and people aren't trusting each other. So this is a really bad foundation, which is why it's at the bottom of the pyramid. It's an eroded foundation. Number two of the 5 is the fear of conflict. Now, the lack of trust is going to result in a fear of conflict, which then in turn results in team members being incapable of engaging in debates or openly voicing their opinions. So people may disagree with each other, but they don't say anything. And then you don't get the great results. The team that completely avoids conflicts, they're going to be resulting in inferior results, because if people could engage in conflict and really talk about, hey, that's not really a great idea, or that part of that idea is not great, I have a better idea, then you could come up with a much better solution. Instead, people may let that mediocre choice get through and be approved because they didn't want to have a fight and they were afraid of an awkward conversation. So making people feel safe that they can have a conflict and that it's not personal is important for you as a manager to make sure that people actually do argue. And we have had in past lessons where you may want to designate someone to be the devil's advocate, where it's their job through role playing to say what's wrong with the idea. Number 3 of the pyramid is the lack of commitment. So fear of conflict is going to result in a lack of commitment, where team members have not bought into the decisions because they haven't been able to disagree, they haven't been heard, and their better idea hasn't been heard. So they're not really committed to the idea. They don't feel committed to the same way in which resulting in an environment where ambiguity prevails. So basically, yeah, this mediocre idea is the most popular, but they don't feel comfortable arguing it. And so they're not really committed to that mediocre idea because they weren't able to talk about what they thought was better. And therefore, they're not really committed to what's going on. And then number 4, going up the pyramid, is the avoidance of accountability. So the lack of commitment is going to be resulting in team members not making each other accountable. So if one has not bought into the decision, they won't make their peers too accountable either. This is just basically everyone in a meeting saying, I don't really care, so I'm not going to make you accountable because I don't really care what's going on. I don't like the choice. I don't like the decision. I don't like where we're going. I'm kind of checked out and I'm not really engaged. So this is where people avoid accountability because they have a low quality decision. And then number 5 is the inattention to results. If the team members don't feel accountable, they're going to put their own needs, which would be their ego or recognition or career development, ahead of those team goals. Because again, these people don't care at this point. And this results in the team losing sight, and then the company is going to be suffering. So this is just really like a model of mediocrity, and we're looking for high performance here. So first, we have to address the dysfunctions that are going on in the team. So as the first step for addressing these dysfunctions, every team needs to understand that these dysfunctions exist, that they're normal. The leadership in the company needs to lead by example and set the tone for the whole team to overcome the dysfunctions. And this means that the leadership needs to be the first ones to be vulnerable, encouraging debate and conflict, and make responsibilities and deadlines clear, set the team standards, and last but not least, be clear on the team's outcome. So if you want people to be willing to share their mistakes, you, the leader, have to be the first one that's vulnerable to talk about how you're not perfect and how you've made mistakes. Once people see that you're a real human being, then they'll share that they've made mistakes too, but you have to be the first one. You have to be the leader that's vulnerable. It's important to understand that reaching consensus is not the goal. Instead, make sure that everyone is being heard. So it's okay to disagree. It's okay to make a decision where not everyone has a majority buy-in to it, but everyone needs to be heard why they don't like the idea. Otherwise, they don't feel valued. Now, interesting, it is contradictory to the normal assumption that the team should avoid conflicts, but instead encourage and embrace those conflicts. Remember our virtuoso teams, the high-performance teams, they fought a lot, and managers were actually told in that last lesson, let them fight. You may actually want to encourage the fight because that's when you get some really high quality innovation and people really talking about what they think should be done. Now, here are some simple questions to understand the level of dysfunction you're facing. So ask yourselves these questions. Do team members openly and readily disclose their opinions? My guess is you got at least one person who just sits in that meeting and doesn't say anything. Are team members compelling and productive? Or are they checking their text messages and looking at their watch? Does the team come to decisions quickly and avoid getting bogged down by consensus? Or does everyone say, let's take a vote on it a lot? Do team members confront one another about their shortcomings? Or are people polite and they just sort of don't say anything? And do team members sacrifice their own interest for the good of the team? Or is everyone kind of looking out for number one and the team second? So you kind of know the answers to these questions already, and we need to get the correct answers if we want to have high performance teams. Now, no team is going to be perfect. That's okay. And constantly working to ensure that the answers to the above questions are yes. That's your goal. Now, such an environment is key for creating a culture of what we call blameless postmortems. And creation of such a culture is a continuous effort learning which is a journey, not a destination. So we just want to make sure that you get yes to all those questions. That's your goal. Now, we also learn helpful strategies on how to overcome these dysfunctions and become a cohesive team. Teamwork is the ultimate competitive advantage. So let's get into the lessons on how we're actually going to make these 5 issues go away. Lesson 1 is being open about mistakes as a group and be willing to build trust. Now, like any good relationship, trust is the key to a solid team. And when members in a group actually trust each other, they will talk openly about tough or touchy subjects. You, as the boss, the manager, you may need to start that conversation or have someone be the devil's advocate role model. Now, if they can talk about hard things, then they're going to be able to talk about the best solutions. Now, you don't have to be mean to people, but you do have to point out where some negativity or disagreement lies. Team members can build trust when they are vulnerable to each other. Now, people also need to see that there's no reason to protect themselves and start talking about their mistakes and vulnerabilities. When they do this, others will see the full picture of their peers, and this is where trust gets built. They start to see each other as human beings. When they see that their peers have weaknesses and make mistakes, they're going to feel less hesitant to share their own weaknesses. And the leader needs to be the example of vulnerability and the most vulnerable one as well. So let's take a look at an example. Let's take a look at a CEO, Catherine, at Decision Tech. She knew that her group needed to take the time to share mistakes, and they weren't doing that. So she led the team by telling them first about her previous management failures and also that she had been fired once from a job in the past. Now, doing this, Catherine is going to be earning the team's trust, and this helps them open up and share their own shortcomings as well. Lesson 2 is even if a few people disagree when making decisions, everyone needs to be committed to the final choice. So you don't have to agree with it, but you do have to be committed to it. So one of the keys to becoming a great team is to make decisions together and stand by them. Team players realize that making any decision will always be more beneficial than not making a decision. And when the team doesn't make a choice, there's going to be confusion and ambiguity, which will trickle down and affect work on every level. However, a consensus may not always be possible. Now, people often have differing opinions, and it's not easy or practical to please everyone. That's why effective teams agree to commit to a decision that will help the common goal, regardless if they agree. So to do this, though, every opinion needs to be heard. Now, most rational people will accept the decision, even if their opinion differs, as long as their feelings on the matter are listened to and addressed. And a quality of a cohesive team is that they will all fully commit to decisions that the group has made, even if they argued passionately against it earlier. That's okay. You just need to be committed. You don't have to agree to it. And lesson 3 is going to be focusing on the collective results rather than individual goals. So in a truly efficient team, the members realize that the goal of the team is more important than the individual gains. So take, for example, a basketball coach. This coach had to drop one of his best players because that player was actually more concerned with how many points he scored in the game than whether or not the team won. So he was more interested in himself than he was the team. So if the team lost, but he scored more points than anybody else, he thought that was a win. You can't have that in a team. So when someone puts their own goals in front of the team's, they're actually going to be hindering everyone else. And every time this happens in the business world, people are going to start to lose their sight of the collective goal and the company is going to suffer. So eventually those who are exceptional team players are going to leave because they want to be at a team that works. So what kind of goals should a team make? There's basically 2 qualities of good team goals. One is that they're clearly defined. You'd be surprised how many people don't know what the goal is, and that you can measure them. So put a number on it. You need to have numbers that you can measure, whether it's time or dollars or R&B or customer satisfaction. We need numbers somewhere, some kind of statistics. So if the group's goal is clear and can be measured, then members can't focus on their own goals because they're going to be accountable to accomplishing the team goal. And common goals will also encourage team members to help and support one another to make it happen. So now we're going to be moving into our 20-minute homework, and you'll see on the left we have the 5 model, and I'm going to ask you to choose in this written assignment, choose one of the 5 dysfunctions that you have experienced in the past and describe how it hurt the team. So for example, absence of trust. I remember that I've been in several teams throughout my career, and I remember that when people didn't trust each other on one particular team, we didn't share really good ideas because we were afraid that that team member was going to take my idea and say that it was their idea and take credit for it. And I didn't want that to happen because I didn't trust this person. So I didn't throw out a really good idea that I know was better than what the team had been coming up with, but I was concerned that they were just going to take credit for it, and I didn't want to get angry about that. So that's where absence of trust in one example in my situation was the team as a whole suffered because there was one person I didn't trust. Now, had I trusted them, I would have told them what I was thinking. And then fear of conflict. I've been guilty of this as well, where, I like to have pleasant conversations. I like people to like me. I like to have a good time and laugh. But sometimes people put out ideas that I think are awful, even if it's the leader. And sometimes I think, well, I don't want to cause a fight. I don't really care that much about what we're meeting about. So I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. So I've been guilty of not talking about conflict. Now, had we had a role play where someone said, Michael, your job is to take the other side, take the opposing side and say why you don't like it, I would have been happy to take that position, but the boss never asked me to do it. Then you get lack of commitment. I can't tell you how many times I've been on a team where other people didn't care, which kind of infected me, and then I didn't care either. So whether it was a good idea or a bad idea, it was successful or not, I didn't really care about it. And then the avoidance of accountability. I have seen teams as well where no one actually held them directly accountable for the results, where they said, you can be a part of the solution, but if things don't work out, there was no accountability there. So it didn't matter whether you gave a good idea or not because there were no consequences for whether it worked or not. And then inattention to results. And this is just basically where I've been into teams where people were sloppy. They never showed up at meetings. They didn't really care one way or another. And I got sloppy too because they didn't care. I didn't care. So you see how this is all sort of infectious, that even though I could be the super efficient one in a meeting, if other people are taking that opposite point of view and being really inattentive and not caring and not being trustworthy, I kind of become them as well. So I'd encourage you in your 20-minute homework to do number one, where you're going to choose one of the 5 dysfunctions that you've experienced in the past and describe how it hurt the team. So was there a time when you didn't trust someone in a team and that was actually harmful? Whereas a time where you didn't create conflict, you didn't disagree with someone because that wasn't okay, and that ended up being a worse decision for the team. So just choose one of them and write about what happened and how that actually hurt the team as a whole. And then number 2 is describe a time when either you or the team did not do well because you or others were not comfortable talking about a mistake. So see if you can come about yourself where you had made a mistake and you didn't admit to it, people didn't help you correct it, and this actually made things worse. What I'd like you to further write about is what could have happened differently if there was more of an open discussion. What would have happened if you or someone on the team had actually talked about that mistake and then people had spent time fixing the mistake and made a better decision? So tell me about what actually happened because you did not share your vulnerability, and what do you think would have happened had you been more open with it? So I look forward to reading your homework. This could just be 1 page or a page and a half, and I hope you enjoy the homework. And remember, this is going to be an exercise for you to learn how to be vulnerable, because now you're going to be teaching this to your team so that they can actually not have the 5 dysfunctions of a team and they can become high performance, which that's the goal. And I'll see you at the next lesson. Bye-bye.